The clinking of silverware had become unbearable. Every scrape, every polite giggle, every whispered toast felt like it was happening in slow motion, like the whole room was underwater except for me. I could hear everything, feel everything. And then she said it. Loud, sharp, cruel. Don't touch me. You look ridiculous. Not quietly, not in a whisper only I could hear, but right there, in front of the senior partners, the paralegals, the smiling wives in their tasteful earrings, and the waitstaff who had paused just long enough to glance over like I was the latest casualty in some social firing squad. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that she smiled right after. Not at me, God, no, but at the table, like she was proud of it, like she wanted them all to see her drawing a line between who she was now and who I'd never be. I stared at her hand, still resting near the bread plate. I remembered holding that hand through hospital visits, cold nights, and panic attacks she never told her coworkers about. I remembered the tremble in her fingers when she almost quit law school. I remembered thinking, like a damn fool, that she'd never weaponize my loyalty. But she had, and in that moment, something inside me cracked. Not like a thunderous snap, no, it was quiet, soft, like when you realize the faucet's been leaking for months, and you just ignored the mold. I stood up. Not with fury, not with drama, just enough. The chair legs didn't even scrape. I had that much dignity left. I looked at her, not expecting remorse. I was past that. You're not worth it, I said, and meant every syllable like it was a full stop. Then I walked. Out of the room. Out of her life. Or so I thought. Because here's the thing. When you walk out, you expect it to be over. Final. Done. But that dinner? That stupid, awful dinner? It was just the opening act. The real show started 2 nights later, when I found the envelope on our kitchen counter. No return address. No explanation. Just a flash drive. And what was on it? I haven't slept right since. I held the flash drive in my hand for a full 30 minutes before I plugged it in. Just stood there in the kitchen, staring at it like it might bite. Myra wasn't home. Probably still out at some networking event or curled up somewhere pretending she wasn't someone's fiancé. I hadn't spoken to her since the dinner. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, which, in a way, was her final insult. That she could humiliate me, watch me walk out, and not even care enough to follow up. But this drive, it reeked of purpose. There was no note, no envelope, just a thin black USB drive on the kitchen counter next to her vitamins, as if it had always been there. But I knew better. Myra didn't use flash drives. She lived in the cloud, where things were clean, curated, deletable. Flash drives were for people with secrets they didn't want traced. I don't know what I expected when I finally clicked the folder open. Maybe photos. Maybe something like an apology. But what I found were videos. 11 of them. All time-stamped. All from the same device, a dashcam. And not just any dashcam, mine. The first clip was 2 weeks old. Myra's car pulling into the driveway. Nothing unusual. Except she wasn't alone. A man got out of the passenger seat. Tall. Khaki coat, sunglasses even though it was dusk. He didn't follow her into the house. She didn't invite him in. She just stood with him at the door, laughed softly, touched his arm the way she used to touch mine, like it meant something. I watched their silhouettes talk for 6 minutes. I watched her check her phone. I watched her look toward the dash cam for a split second, like maybe, just maybe, she knew. The next clip was worse. And the next. Different locations. Different days. Sometimes at night. Sometimes after lunch. Always with the same man. And always with that look, the one I hadn't seen on her face in almost a year. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was closer to something colder. Like grief, but hollow. I kept watching. One video had them parked in an underground garage, just sitting there. Myra leaned her head on his shoulder. He kissed her temple. They didn't even try to hide it. At some point, I realized I wasn't crying. My throat was tight, my chest aching, but no tears came. I wanted to scream, wanted to punch the wall. But all I could do was sit there, staring at the screen like a coward, like a man who still couldn't accept that his fiancé had replaced him piece by piece and never bothered to inform him. But the last video? That one changed everything. Because it wasn't from the dashcam. It was from a hidden camera. In our bedroom. And I swear to God, I had never seen that footage before. I sat there frozen, my fingers trembling on the trackpad, the glow from the monitor making the whole kitchen feel like a crime scene. The file name was just a string of random numbers, nothing to hint at what it held. I hovered over it for nearly a full minute, my stomach churning, my heart pounding hard enough to blur my vision. Then I double-clicked. For a second the screen stayed black. Then the image flickered to life. Our bedroom, my side of the bed, my nightstand with the old alarm clock, and the paperback I'd been pretending to read. The view was from up near the ceiling, angled just enough to cover the whole room. It wasn't grainy phone footage either. It was crisp, clean. Somebody had installed a camera up there like they were planning a documentary. At first nothing happened. Just Myra walking in, dropping her bag on the floor, sitting on the edge of the bed. She wasn't crying or nervous. She looked like someone checking into a hotel she'd stayed at 100 times before. Then the door opened again, and the man from the dashcam clips walked in. He didn't look cautious or guilty. He looked at home. He sat down next to her, said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed. That low, private laugh she used to reserve for me. I couldn't stop myself from leaning closer to the screen, even though my hands were slick with sweat. What they did next wasn't explicit. The file cut right before it would have been. But it was enough. The way she touched his face. The way she whispered something into his ear, and he smiled. The way she got up and opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the envelope with our vacation savings. The one we'd been filling for months for a trip she said she couldn't wait to take with me. She handed it to him without even counting it. He tucked it into his coat like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I paused the video there, my face reflected back in the dark screen. I wanted to delete it, smash the drive, burn the laptop, anything to unsee it. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was humiliation turning into a kind of slow-burning resolve I didn't recognize. This wasn't some random affair. This was theft. Planning. Betrayal layered on betrayal. And whoever left me this flash drive wanted me to know it. The last seconds of the video flickered back on before the file ended. Myra turned toward the hidden camera, directly toward it, and smirked. Not at him. Not at herself. At me. Like she knew I'd be sitting right here one day watching this, and she wanted that to be the last thing burned into my memory. I sat back in my chair, shaking, realizing two things at once. First, that my life with Myra had already been dismantled piece by piece without my noticing, and second, that whoever had sent me this wasn't done yet. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move from the kitchen chair. I just sat there in the blue light of my laptop, the flash drive still plugged in like it was keeping the truth alive. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirk from that last frame. That subtle, smug twist of her mouth that made it clear. This wasn't something she fell into. She had chosen this. Planned this. She wanted me to know. And I had no idea why. By sunrise, I had convinced myself I needed air. Not answers. Not revenge. Just air. I grabbed my coat, stepped outside, and nearly slipped on the frost-covered steps. I hadn't realized how cold it had gotten. The world was perfectly still, like it hadn't gotten the memo that mine was on fire. I walked to my car out of habit, not even thinking about where I was going. The windshield was already thawing under the weak sun, and I was about to open the driver's side door when I saw it, tucked under the wiper. A piece of paper, folded twice. No envelope. No markings. Just there. I unfolded it with numb fingers. No signature. Just one line, printed in capital letters. Look in the wall. That was it. No context. No address. No name. Just a suggestion so vague and cryptic it might have been a prank. Except now I was way past the point of ignoring anything. I looked around, half expecting to see someone watching me from the hedges or filming me from across the street. But everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I got back inside and started tearing through the house like a lunatic. I pulled furniture away from the walls. Opened closets. Checked the attic. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Some secret compartment? A hole? A message? Nothing made sense. Myra had lived here with me for 3 years. If something had been hidden this whole time, it would mean she'd been planning this from way earlier than I thought. After 2 hours of frantic searching, I almost gave up until I reached the back room. The one she never really liked. She always said it smelled musty and never wanted to hang anything on the walls. There was an old bookshelf pressed against the far corner, and as I started pulling it away, I noticed a square outline in the drywall. Not a vent. Not a fuse box. A perfect little rectangle, about the size of a shoebox, and almost invisible under the yellow paint. I hesitated. My chest was pounding so hard it hurt. Then I pried it open with the back end of a hammer. Inside was a small cardboard box. And inside that, a phone. Not hers. Not mine. A burner. Fully charged. One message waiting on the screen. Unknown number. She lied about the miscarriage. Start there. My hands went cold. Myra had told me she lost the baby a year ago. Said it was sudden. Said the doctor confirmed it. I had believed her. I had held her as she cried. I had blamed myself for stressing her out. But now I didn't know what to believe. And if this was true, if she had lied about that, then whatever I thought this betrayal was, it was about to go deeper than I ever imagined. I didn't touch the burner phone for a while. I just stared at it, like it had dropped out of some alternate timeline where I'd been living a different life, one where I wasn't the fool sitting in a house built on lies. That message, she lied about the miscarriage. Start there. Played on loop in my brain, louder than anything else, louder even than the memory of her laugh with him, louder than her voice at the dinner table when she told me not to touch her. I didn't want to believe it. Not because I thought she was incapable of lying. I already knew she could. But because that lie, it was something else. That lie required a new level of cruelty. It wasn't just cheating or humiliation. It was rewriting our shared grief, weaponizing it, using it to control me. And if that was true, if she faked something so awful, then she didn't just betray me. She hollowed me out on purpose. I remembered every painful second of those weeks after the so-called miscarriage. The way she locked herself in the bathroom. The way she slept with her back to me. The cold silences. The way I started apologizing for everything. The dishes, the rent being late, even the weather, because I thought it was my fault she lost the baby. I thought maybe I didn't love her right. That maybe the universe had punished us because I wasn't enough of a man. But now I was starting to realize none of it had been real. I opened the phone again and tapped the message. It didn't expand. It wasn't a chat thread, just a one-off warning from whoever had left this box in the wall. I opened the contacts. Only one number was saved, under the name, Trust Me. No call logs. No browser. Just that number and that message. I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since the night she cried in my arms, clutching her stomach and whispering that something felt wrong. I dug through the hallway filing cabinet until I found the folder labeled Health. Inside were receipts, invoices, old prescriptions, appointment slips. The usual stuff. I remembered asking her, at the time, if we should keep the ultrasound photos, the ones from early on. She said she threw them away because they were too painful to look at. I'd never questioned it. But now, I dug deeper, and that's when I found it. A bill from Westmark OBGYN, dated 2 weeks before she told me she was pregnant. I unfolded it, and my stomach turned. It wasn't for a prenatal visit. It was for an IUD insertion. $380. Paid in full. Let me repeat that. She had birth control implanted before she told me she was pregnant. Which means, there never was a baby. I sat down hard on the floor, the edges of the paper crumpling in my hand. I couldn't even speak. I just kept blinking, trying to convince myself I was misreading it. That maybe she got it removed after. That maybe this was some clerical mix-up. But then I remembered the look on her face when she told me she lost the baby. How she barely made eye contact. How the tears didn't come until I held her. She'd played me, manipulated me, weaponized something sacred, and used it to make me stay when I should have walked. And then, like clockwork, the burner phone buzzed. One new message. Next, check the storage unit. She kept everything. Unit number 204. Code 8791. I didn't even know she had a storage unit. But I was about to find out what else she'd been hiding. I didn't wait until morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I grabbed my keys, the burner phone, and the envelope with the storage info and drove across town with that pit-of-the-stomach feeling you get before bad news. It was close to midnight when I pulled into the lot behind the storage facility. The kind of place you only visit during the day, tall metal fences, flickering lights, cameras I wasn't sure even worked. But I wasn't thinking about safety. I was thinking about the number, 204, and the code, 8791. Whoever was behind those texts wanted me to find something. And now I needed to know what. I walked past rows of identical units until I reached it, 204. A rusted lock dangled from the handle. I punched in the code. It clicked. I pulled the door up, and it groaned like something waking up. The air inside smelled stale, like paper and dust and forgotten things. But the light from the hallway was enough to see that this wasn't just a pile of junk. It was deliberately organized. There were 5 boxes, each one labeled in Myra's handwriting. Documents, memories, work, photos, and one that made my breath catch. Ellis. I went for that one first. Inside were things I didn't even know she'd kept. Ticket stubs from our first movie, the necklace I gave her for our second anniversary that she claimed she lost, handwritten letters I'd left in her suitcase on business trips. All of it carefully wrapped. Protected. It didn't feel like hate. It felt like possession. Like I was a chapter in a book she didn't want to reread, but refused to throw out. Underneath the trinkets was a manila folder. Thick. I opened it and found a stack of printed emails. At first I thought they were between her and the man from the dashcam. But they weren't. These were to someone named Callen. I'd never heard the name before. The emails were dated over a 2-year period, overlapping our entire engagement, and the language in them was strange. She wasn't flirting. She was reporting. I flipped through dozens of messages, summaries of our arguments, details about my job interviews, notes about my moods, my family. One email literally listed the medications in our cabinet, including one I'd taken briefly for anxiety after my father passed away. She had annotated it with a comment. Ellis has resumed taking sertraline. Avoid triggering emotional conversation until he stabilizes. What the hell was this? Who was Callen? Why was Myra documenting my mental state like I was part of a clinical trial? I pulled out my phone and took photos of every page. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't grief. It was something colder. Anger, yes, but not the screaming kind. This was precision-cut rage. This was the kind that makes you remember every red flag you ignored and hate yourself for calling it love. I moved to the box labeled Photos. Inside was a smaller case. Locked. No key. But taped to the underside of the lid was another note. This one wasn't typed. It was scrawled in red ink on an index card. You're close. But she still has the original. Don't let her burn it. That's when I realized I wasn't just uncovering an affair. This wasn't about cheating anymore. This was something else. Something planned. Something clinical. And for the first time since the dinner, I felt something unexpected. Fear. I left the storage unit with my head spinning. The photos of those emails burned into my memory. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of sleeping under the same roof that Myra had filled with lies, lies so carefully documented they read more like lab notes than love, made my skin crawl. I parked in an empty lot behind a closed diner and sat there in the dark with the engine off, the burner phone glowing on the passenger seat beside me. It buzzed again at 3:12 a.m. New message. He's ready to meet. He's been watching you. Don't be late. Attached was a pin drop location, somewhere on the industrial edge of town, near the old rail yard where nobody went unless they were dumping trash or buying something they couldn't afford to be seen with. It was the kind of place people vanished in. But I went. I shouldn't have, I know that now. But I needed to know who Callen was. Why Myra had been reporting to him. Why someone had been feeding me breadcrumbs like I was a test subject who'd finally reached the end of the maze. And above all, what the hell this had all been for. When I got there, he was already waiting. A tall man in a dark coat leaned against a silver hatchback parked under a dead streetlight. He wasn't armed. He wasn't nervous. He looked bored. "You're Ellis," he said, like it wasn't a question. I nodded. I was wondering when you'd get curious enough to stop being a victim. That line hit me harder than I expected. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I asked him who he was. He said he worked in behavioral compliance. Whatever that meant. I asked him if he was the one who'd installed the camera in our bedroom. He smiled. No, she did. But not for the reason you think. I asked him what reason that was. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a folder. Just like the one I'd found in storage. Only this one had my name on the front in thick red marker. Inside were documents. Dozens. Surveillance summaries. Audio transcripts. Photos taken from distances I couldn't begin to understand. They weren't just of me. They were of my coworkers, my family, even my childhood home. Every page was like a punch to the gut. Someone had built a full psychological profile on me, like I was a target or a patient or a subject. She picked you for a reason, Callen said. She needed someone with your specific profile. Predictable, empathetic, self-sacrificing. Most people don't know they're being studied. But you? You've always suspected something was off, haven't you? I didn't answer. Because yes, I had. For years. The way she reacted to things I hadn't told her yet. The way she preemptively comforted me before something bad happened. Like she was reading a script. like she already knew how I'd behave. "What is this?" I whispered, flipping through the last few pages. "Is this a government thing?" He laughed. "No, Ellis. This was private, funded, controlled, designed. Your relationship, the fights, the reconciliation, the pregnancy lie, it was all part of a simulation. A controlled emotional stress study. And you were the constant." I wanted to throw up. My vision blurred. Myra, the woman I cooked for, planned a life with, cried beside, hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She had experimented on me. "I don't believe you," I muttered. He shrugged. "You don't have to. But you might want to stop her before she submits the final report. Once she does, you won't exist anywhere but footnotes and graphs." And then he got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing there like a man who'd just learned his whole life had been a scripted performance. When I got back to the house, her suitcase was by the door, and she was upstairs, erasing everything. When I walked through the door, she didn't look surprised to see me. Myra was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in the same clothes from wherever she'd been. Polished, calm, like she was about to close another deal. The suitcase at her feet was packed. The laptop beside her was open, and on the screen was a document filled with charts, summaries, observations. My name was everywhere on that page. I stepped closer, slowly, like I was walking into someone else's house. "Is this what it's all been?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "A project?" She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with something that wasn't quite guilt, more like fatigue, like she'd been waiting for this confrontation and was relieved it was finally happening. "It wasn't supposed to go on this long," she said. "That broke me more than any lie ever could. I gave you everything, Myra. My love, my patience, my future. And you used it like a lab rat in a maze." Her jaw tightened. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did. You rewired me. You made me doubt my reality. You made me mourn a baby that never existed." She looked down at the floor, and in that moment, something in me clicked. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't confused. I was done being the subject of someone else's narrative. So I picked up her laptop, still warm from her palms, and calmly walked downstairs with it. She didn't follow. Maybe she knew there was nothing left to say. Maybe she'd already accepted the ending. I didn't smash the laptop. That would have been too easy, too dramatic. I copied the entire contents to an external drive, encrypted it, and forwarded the files to 3 people: a lawyer I trusted, a tech journalist who owed me a favor, and one particularly bold subreddit moderator who had been messaging me since the first video leak. I didn't have to explain much. The documents spoke for themselves. By sunrise, her project wasn't a secret anymore. By sunset, her entire research group had been exposed. I never saw her again after that. She disappeared in the way people with deep connections and deeper guilt tend to do, quietly, efficiently, without a trace. But her absence wasn't a wound. It was a reset. It took months to feel normal again. I got therapy. Real therapy. Not the manipulated, fed through a fake conflict kind. I reconnected with my sister, started freelancing in graphic design again, built a life that didn't depend on someone else's validation. For the first time in years, I slept through the night without wondering what was real. And one day, I stopped seeing her in the shadows of every thought. I don't hate her anymore, but I pity her, because I loved her with everything I had. And she'll never know what it felt like to be real with someone. Not data, not strategy, not analysis. Just real. She studied me like a subject, but I healed like a man. And I won't be anyone's experiment ever again.